it.
Hello again, and welcome to 3reate. I'm your host, Andrew Newman. 3reate features two types of episodes in a single feed, weekly and interviews. Each week, Nathan and I discuss current trends, our projects, and whatever else is on our minds. We'll also bring you fortnightly episodes where I interview folks across art, science, and technology, where we dive into their stories and get to the heart of how creativity drives them. My AI co-host will now introduce this episode, and I'll be back with you in about a minute. Thanks for listening.
Hello, I am your AI co-host. You can support this podcast at patreon.com/3reate or at ko-fi.com/3reate. This week, Andrew and Nathan explore the mental cost of living in an age of information overload. They discuss the power of disconnecting, trading multitasking for singular focus to boost creativity and combat cognitive fatigue. The conversation then shifts to the crucial role of publicly funded basic science, using examples from AI-powered wildfire prediction to the development of mRNA vaccines. Andrew also shares a powerful story from his time documenting the oral traditions of Navajo elders, reflecting on nonlinear storytelling, the preservation of culture, and the incredible history of the Navajo Code Talkers. It's a deep dive into focus, science, and the different ways we share knowledge, and now the humans.
We did it again.
Yeah, it was already 20 minutes. We were just chatting for 20 minutes.
We need to just restart recording everything and just cut it in post if we don't hit it. Yeah,
it's a better idea. Yeah, much better idea.
Yeah, we're recording early too, so maybe we're just fresh today because it's Thursday. We usually record on Friday. But how you been?
Good, busy, but good. Lots of things happening. Trying to do lots of things, and when you expect pace layering to take effect, waiting for something to come in later than it actually does, but when it comes up before your plans and things bundle up together. But overall, good. How are you?
That's good. I'm good. I would agree. I feel like I've been trying to take a little time off, or we talked about this last episode, where that usually just means I start another project.
Yeah.
But just try to not necessarily take a break, but work on different modality, I guess, is maybe a better way to think about it. So I've been doing a lot of tech shit. So we've been talking about this stuff too, but I've done more tech shit now. But this morning, I took a little bit of time to have coffee and read a book.
Yeah. Although I get the sense that you read still quite often.
I read a ton. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I read at least a book a week, and I have a bunch of magazines I'll read, or books, or
magazines. People still do that now?
I do, yeah. I have digital subscriptions on because almost everybody now has a digital subscription.
Okay.
But I get
I'm thinking old school. Oh, okay, yeah. Cool. Yes. Yeah. All right.
Because I find sitting on a screen all day, because I am a technologist, so I'm on a computer way too much. Mm-hmm. It's a nice break for my eyes, but also I don't have any distraction. The magazine isn't going to pop up a text message or whatever. And I find that I enjoy it a lot better. I've tried digital reading. I've tried Kindles. I've tried iPad. I will in a pinch, or if I'm on a flight or something and I forget to bring something, I'll have my digital or whatever. But it's a very different experience. And I don't know if it's because I grew up with paper before the technology, or if it's there is just something because it's so tactile. And then you're actively flipping pages versus flipping your thumb. There's a full body almost movement to some extent. I don't know. And I know a lot of people who read almost unanimously will prefer a book or paper. They don't always do it just because books are expensive, or magazines are a pain in the ass or whatever. But yes, I've been really trying to read more and also focus more. I was talking to a buddy about this earlier this week, actually, and we were catching up, and I made the observation that there's so much information in the world. We're constantly bombarded by information everywhere. And it's not just TV, radio, internet, Twitter, all this shit. It's just you're getting more and more bullshit in the mail. You're getting you're talking with people more. You're
the slop.
Yeah, you're texting, you're all this stuff, and it's all information, and it's all things your brain needs to focus on. You're listening to podcasts, you're listening to music, you're And so what I find is that I listen to a lot of stuff during the day. I'll listen to music or I'll listen to podcasts, then I'll be doing work. So I'm already multitasking, and multitasking is fake. So my brain is just working harder,
Swapping.
right, to
More
listen to
roles
something
between,
and do work. And so I've been really trying hard to, a lot of times during breakfast, I'll listen to a podcast. I'll catch up on like news cycle, or I'll be listening to something and just continue it. So I've just been eating breakfast now. And then, like I said, this morning I was drinking coffee and reading a book, and try to singular stimuli.
Yeah. That's definitely something that people are advocating for now, especially in the busy life that we have, is take the time to just eat your meal. Don't watch a video. Don't listen to a podcast. Focus on the taste and the texture of the food that you're having.
Yeah. And we talked about, like last time too, my phone is on like neuter mode all day pretty much. And so I extended that a little bit too. I've also extended the amount of people who can break through, but it hasn't been a big deal at this point. And it funnels out so much of the constant drip of just information. And I'm finding that, and going on walks and stuff, I'm not listening to a podcast, I'm not listening to music, I just go for a walk. And it's I understand, I think now, why so many people in technology are into all these weird fatty things, to go on a silent retreat for 10 months and all this kind of shit. Cause it's like, you have to, your brain will cope, and then you get so good at coping. But what it does is it narrows your focus and attention. And so you might be able to focus very deeply on something for a few minutes, but then you're constantly cycling, and it's just really fatiguing. And when you're out of that bubble, and if you can break the cycle of information consumption, you get all sorts of ideas. You get creative. You get energy. You don't feel this constant fatigue, which isn't necessary. It's not even like a psychological perception. Right. It's just your brain is just constantly filtering. And then a lot of people are reading news or Twitter or whatever. And then there's a whole level of like social psychological nonsense that then you have like existential dread from thinking the world is much worse than it is. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just sheer information consumption.
Yeah. And that's why there's these digital fasts that I actually think make a lot of sense that people go and do. It's where you take a break from, maybe not full on, because they're certainly, we have to stay connected in this world, but doing basically what you're doing.
But do we though?
I don't know. It depends. I think there's some people who, obviously, if you're, say, a Tibetan monk, for instance, you probably don't need to stay as connected as someone working in a...
But like when I was a kid, we didn't have internet, and you would sometimes go weeks without seeing people or hearing from people, and that was normal. Like, unless you, like, when I was in school, obviously you'd see friends, but even then I didn't see some days I wouldn't even see my friends because we're in different classes or we're doing different stuff, or they're sick or whatever. And it's just like life went on, and then you saw them, you're like, oh shit, I haven't seen you for a couple of days, let's catch up. And you go catch up or find out nothing happened. and that was normal. But now it's, I'm sure you'd probably have the same thing, where I have all sorts of different group chats with people where I'm constantly like, you know,
I'm shaking my head. No.
Well, I have constant contact with a lot of different people.
Yeah. I mean, different ways of living, but yeah.
And I don't mind it. And I do, though. It got to be the point where I would be constantly like getting messages from different people and responding, and most of the time it's not like mundane shit. It's like people have ideas, or we're discussing this thing asynchronously. But then I made the observation, in line with kind of what we're talking, that it doesn't matter if I don't respond in the moment, because it's all async anyway. And everyone in my group, no one's like mad that you're not responding, and we all do it anyway. And so like I'll respond at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock at the end of the day, and not while I'm trying to be productive. And I think the other maybe tip for folks, this is something I think I've talked about. I really try to keep my mornings clearer for ideation and learning. And so it's like, if I'm working on a problem, I'll think about the problem, I'll do some research on it, or I'll be just trying to explore and understand what's happening in like the field, or if it's related to something. And I think in the era of knowledge work, a lot of people look at that as kind of like sloughing off because you're like not in a meeting. And the reality is, it's like, that's when I get my best ideas. That's when I solve a lot of problems, because I'll either be actively thinking about it, or I'll be engaged in some other like adjacent knowledge pursuit. And then I'll get that kind of aha moment, or I'll So it's like I won't be actively necessarily thinking about stuff all the time. Sometimes I will. I'll go on a bike ride and then I'll be thinking about some problems, or I'll be doing kind of the like mental work. So the other day I was riding, I was thinking about information architecture for a project that I may or may not talk about today about it. And I was like, this is a really hard problem. Like, how do I break it down? Like, how do I make it so that I could do something today to start making progress? But to do that, you need to understand what the goal is or what the outcome needs to be. And I'm still not really sure what that is. I have this kind of like generalized idea. And the way that I termed it this morning is I don't really have a business model, but there's probably 5 or 6 different opportunities to follow once the core like technology is built.
Yeah, your hypotheses.
Yeah, so I've separated that, and I'm working on building a proof of concept. I'm working on improving a proof of concept that's already built in a different way than it was intentionally built for. But to do that, I needed to really break down that problem more. So I was on a bike ride thinking about it. And it's like, oh yeah, I could do this. Oh, what if I remove all this other stuff, put it in the side pile and say, I want to accomplish this one thing, and that's going to get me further. And so I talk a lot about this in product work as well, in that you need a very strong vision, and that vision needs to grow and adapt to anchor you into the future. But then you really need to be focusing on, what can I do today? What are the 5 things I can do this week to build towards that? And then you have to be accommodating for when things change, because you might get a learning that something you're doing is way harder than you thought it would. Okay, fine. How do you break that down to make progress on it? Is it something you should make progress on? Do you just decide to just keep it as like tech debt, as we'll say, or just unaddressed? And that's a hard, I find the longer I do this, the more I age, the more wisdom I get, the harder it is for people to do.
I was going to say, what is this referring to? Living or product work?
Yeah, but I think it like this kind of mindset is applicable to everything that we do, in that you need to have a shared understanding of the ultimate goal of thing you're doing. The business is producing something, you're working in government to get a policy done, but the actual work required to make it happen is often very different. And it's like tactical versus strategic thinking.
Yeah.
And I think part of this problem, and I've seen this get worse over time, is the inability for people to hold more than one thing in their brain. And I think it's so much cognitive fatigue of information. You're sitting in traffic, your kid's sick, like all the normal life stuff has always been the normal life stuff. But we've never been in an era where there's so much information. You're constantly bombarded by choice, that I think so many people are just so overwhelmed and inundated that they only focus on the most immediate thing or what other people tell them to. And we're seeing all sorts of problems in society. In the States here, a lot of people are mad at the government. I think a lot of people on both sides are mad at the government. I don't think this idea that because Trump is the president, that the Republicans are somehow in lockstep in agreement with everything that.
Right.
And I think what we're seeing is a lot of this stuff manifests that we've lost the ability as a society at large to execute on things. And I think it's really easy to sit there and talk about vision, to have an idea. And it's really hard to make that idea actualized. And we talk a lot about that, but I think in this frame, I see this a lot in companies. You're sitting in meetings trying to convince people of ideas or convince people that the work that you're doing should be the most important thing. But instead of making demonstrative progress towards a goal or towards an outcome or showing process or progress, you talk about what it could do or what we should do next quarter or how it could grow or what the possible market size is. And all that stuff is really important. And it's really important to be clear on that. But it's also probably the least important part of actually developing something. And I just been seeing this a lot. So I'm trying to tie these ideas together for folks to maybe ponder a little bit on.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different angles we can take. I did want to comment on one piece. This is sort of like focusing on one thing at a time. I believe there has been research on this, but the idea of shower moments where you have a brilliant idea in the shower, and it's because you're not actively trying to think about what it is you're trying to solve or the problem that you're trying to explore, right? So there is this idea that if you just take some time off or explore other things, eventually an insight will spark where you can cross ideas between your mind, and this kind of throws back to some of the first principle stuff that we were talking about the other day,
exactly,
or the other episode.
100%. Yeah, and it's like I talk about time on task and time away from task.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And time away from task, I think, is almost more important than time on task now, because it's so easy to be on task for something. And that doesn't mean like time on task. What I mean by that is you're actively working on something to produce a result, not surfing the internet, Twitter. Oh, I'm supposed to be building this widget in the widget factory, but I'm going to see what Twitler said on Twitter today or poop tweeted. I think that's become confused as well with I'm at work, so I'm working and I'm surfing CNN or Fox News or MSNBC or whatever. And that's not work. And it's not time on task either. And when I talk about time away from task, that's not time away from task either. It is time spent not on a task. So it is time away. But you have to let your brain rest or be engaged in a different modality. So again, it's like I spend all day producing. And so going for a walk and not having a stimulus for music or like a podcast or something allows my brain to engage in different ways. I'm also doing a physical activity that's kinesthetic and not sitting or standing or leaning. And so I think we should almost have a cast in the near future and just break all this stuff down in terms of like different modalities of even like, I know a lot of people have walking desks. They love them because you're still engaged in work, but you're engaged in a different way because you're walking while you're thinking about stuff or reading an email or writing an email. Writing and walking is really hard, but you can get used to it. Yeah. And same with sitting. Like if I need to be really deep in thought, I'm moving. Right. Yeah. A lot of people, it's the opposite. They have to sit and they're just really focused. And there's no right or wrong way, but I think it's being aware of that. And I'll notice if I'm really sitting for a long period of time and really focused on stuff, I get more and more and more distracted. And so I need to go for a walk or I've developed then the strategy to just break all that into my day. And I work all over my house, right? I have a spot in the bar. I have an office. I'll work on the couch. I don't recommend it. I don't work from bed anymore. That's just bad.
Yeah, you probably should.
No,
don't
do that.
Yeah. To sleep, be very protective of stuff around sleep.
Yeah, and like I have a co-working space I go into, so it's really important for me to have. But a lot of people, they need their desk and it needs to be in the way that they need it, and that's all they do at work. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that either. Yeah. But we should I think we should focus on this. I think it's more and more of an issue, and I think it's less and less obvious to people. That's part of the core issue of why everything seems to be broken is that nobody can focus. And it's like you have an idea and we have a vision and okay, we're going to go execute on that. And then the next day or the next week, it's just like this news cycle. I talk about the narrative a lot. The narrative is constantly changing and the cycle is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And so you're just constantly bombarded with a new narrative, which is cognitively fatiguing. And a lot of people don't either recognize it or it's such a slow change that the news cycle used to be a couple weeks and now it's a couple hours that you just don't notice it. It's the frog boiling effect.
The frog boiling. Yeah. That's another first principle. Things over time. Yeah, for sure. We can probably take it on a few different tangents.
Yeah, I'm probably going to edit this. So I'll leave this in so people are like, what the? So I did have some announcements and stuff I did want to talk about. I'll maybe just do like cut and then talk about how interviews are back. So I did an interview with Dimitri on how he built AI models for science purposes to predict future conditions that were more favorable for lightning strikes and what a lightning strike could contribute to fire. And so that was released a couple of days ago. I think it's episode 26 if memory serves. So I hope everybody has a chance to listen to that. He's awesome to talk with. He's working on a couple other papers and I'm excited to have him back on and talk more about it because I think it's an ever pertinent piece in that the way that science is changing in America through a lot of policy things. We touch on that a little bit, but a lot of this work that people are like, why are we studying wildfire? We talk about it in the podcast a little bit about, well, of course, like drier, hotter conditions produce more fires. Duh. Yeah, but to what extent is the question that he's starting to look at. And how dry? Is there some sort of a tipping point to say if we're down rainfall 20%, is there an 80% more fires? Are the fires hotter? Do they move faster? Like all of these things are very, very important to understand, not only to understand if it's true or not, but to understand like to what extent so that you can prepare mitigations or right size the effort to fight these things. And what we're seeing in Canada is their approach is just don't let anyone in the woods. Right? And that's a weird whole thing too, but it like that is an approach. Like,
yeah,
in America, we don't really do that, but we don't do that for partly because we have a fire risk system. And part of that is informed by the work people like Dimitri do. And it's really easy for some bureaucrat in Washington to say, that's not important. We don't need that. Of course, dry weather makes fire burn hotter. But then we lose all that additional insight. And one thing that we really touched on, what we've been talking about in this episode, which I guess this will be before you hear that because we're cutting it. We're not cutting it, but I'm flipping it.
Splitting it up.
Yeah, so coming soon in the episode. The idea of iterative work and how like the modeling that he was doing was only made possible because there's a bunch of other people collecting data or building data for other purposes that they then give back that he can then use to make his model even exist, period, or better. So those are really cool. And then we also talked about papers. You and I talk a lot about papers, but I asked him to explain like what the hell is a paper? What is a scientific paper?
What's the process and how do you go about doing it?
So we got into that a little bit, which I think was good for folks who have never done it. I always take this shit for granted. I've written papers and been authored and all this shit. And it's just what you do in academia, but a lot of people have no idea. So it was a fun episode. I'm trying to do more of those now. Time.
One day, we talk about it a little bit. I don't know if we've ever done like a podcast on it, but the idea of basic research and who funds basic research. Yeah. Like a lot of the stuff that Dimitri's doing is like basic research where you don't have a strict outcome, but you need to understand how things work so that you can actually build upon it in the future.
Yep.
And then who has to quote unquote foot the bill for that?
Yep. Yeah.
This weird model of institutions, like
spoiler alert, private companies don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's like between the government, private institutions, now like universities, weirdly enough. And so it's a very, very preferred system, but it'd be interesting to dig that.
Maybe comment a little bit too. It's like the plutocrats who are in control of the government right now, or the people in government who are in control, who are listening to the plutocrats. They're starting to float this idea that like the government should just be giving big companies money to do basic research or foundational research. And that's like a completely fucked idea that there's a lot of talk against how bad universities are. And like universities are far from perfect. And there's definitely a lot of room for improvement in those systems. Mm-hmm. But the whole point of scientific endeavor, and we talk a little bit about this on the episode as well, that you are producing knowledge that's freely open and distributed, and it's all open source essentially, right? Anybody can go in there and take it and modify it, and that will create all sorts of potentiality that nobody could ever fathom.
Yeah.
But it's also self-checking in that the goal is to move the field forward and not create a profit. And if you're constantly shifting all basic research under the guise of it has to have some sort of identified
profit mentality, return on investment.
It has to have some sort of identified outcome, which is building value or creating money. You get a very, very different world than what we've had for the last 300 years, 400 years. And the reason that they are pushing this is so that they can make more money. The idea of science is effectively altruistic in that it should benefit all of humanity. Yes, people get fame and notoriety, and there are people who abuse that system, but generally speaking, an overwhelming majority of scientists, academics, people who do this stuff are not that. And the bad ones tend to get weeded out, or the bad ones tend to get illuminated. Maybe they're still in the system, but everyone in the system knows about it, or but it becomes known. Whereas if the company is just trying to make money. I think a really great example of this is that ExxonMobil knew in the 60s that sea level rise was directly a result of fossil fuel burning. This is in their documents. It's come out in legal documents. This is not some left or right propaganda. It's very real. They then chose to not make that public, and more importantly, not do anything about it. Whereas if that would have been an academic science paper, which there was at the time, it would have been public knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there are good and bad, right? Like that Exxon is probably the bad example. And we just gave one with Google publishing the idea of transformers, which is led to what we have now.
We talked a little bit about that in the episode, I think, too, though, that the Google Transformer paper was a result of many, many years of study of computer science.
Right.
And a lot of the people who contributed to that paper were former academics. They went to Google to make money or maybe get funded in different ways because the academic system of funding is imperfect. And they either weren't able to get the money for the research that they needed, or they thought the opportunity at Google would be better. A lot of these tech companies, to their credit, allow their workers to continue to contribute in the knowledge field. But again, Google is doing this to try to make money and not push computer science forward. A lot of the innovation in the space of AI currently is still put out by academic labs producing foundational ways to do things. Yes, companies are also contributing, and to their credit, they'll contribute it back. But they're only focused on the things that will make money or have the potentiality to make money. Whereas in academia, it's still focused on what the field thinks is important or what individuals within the field are interested in trying to solve. It's a very different system with a very different motivation. And I think like those can both coexist, but I don't want to see a bunch of public money going into private corporations so that they can then benefit from that, number one. And number two, only then pursue ideas that have a direct monetary value or a way for them to vertically integrate, meaning shutting out competition and create effective monopolies then of knowledge or of study. That's a very dangerous. Anyone who knows anything about biology knows diversity is the number one strength of any system. And the more you have homogeny, the more you have monopoly, the more you have vertical integration, the more fragile the system comes and eventually will collapse. So I'm very scared of, we've created this amazing system in the last, I'd say probably 100 or so years in the United States, where we take the best and the brightest people in the world, we throw buckets of money at them through universities to do research on. And this money too is like such a vanishingly small percentage of all the money in our society that we're spending on shit, even for the government. But that's why we have any of the technology we have today. That's why our society exists even today. That's why we have medicines to treat rare forms of cancer in children, or have people with rare diseases that are number in the dozens or the hundreds. Like those people in the past 50 years would have died and they just wouldn't be here. And we as a society said, yeah, let's try to solve that problem. And then do we learn something? Yeah, we learned a ton. Of like the whole COVID is a topic where some people have feelings on, but the reality is like the mRNA technology, whatever you think about it, was developed because we were looking at how we do viral vaccines and antiviral research. And we were like, well, we should try to develop a new technology. Someone did it. I think the guy who's credited with it is now a vaccine denier and he's in charge of vaccine validations for HHS. That's a whole topic. But you can't argue with the innovation of that technology. You can argue if there's potential harms or not. Spoiler alert, there isn't, but you can have your opinion and your feelings. But we would have never even gotten that opportunity to have that technology if it was up to the companies who are using the chicken embryo method. There's a handful of other ways to produce vaccines, but effectively injecting things into biological creatures and then extracting the antibodies that they produce.
Actually produce.
It's a really great method and it works really well, and it's a very time-tested method. It also has all sorts of caveats, right? Just like everything else. So anyway, it was a really good conversation. I'm trying to do more illumination of this problem and illuminating people and their actual work. Again, that's the whole point of the podcast. But I think it's now more important than ever to be doing that. And so I'm going to try to do it. So if you have people out there who, you want to hear from or you think would be good, you can email podcast@3reate.com. Recommend them. I updated the 3reate website to be a guest. There's a link there now that people can click on and submit themselves if you are interested. Unsolicited email, probably not going to work. I get a ton of email from
bots,
AI bots,
bots,
maybe real people, but I'm like,
but looks like a bot.
Yeah,
you're a bot now.
Like a bot, I'm not. And yeah, that's a decision on my part, which might break opportunity, but also I don't have the time and energy to go through this stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been talking for a while. It's been an Andrew rant episode.
No, it was a story time.
Story time.
It was one of the story time. Yeah, it was nice. Thank you for sharing your. It's a niche perspective. I don't think many people would be able to say something about it. And I think it's a good thing to highlight.
And I mean, we talk about the greatest country in the world. If you want to go see poverty, go to a Native American reservation, and don't go as like a weird tourist. Like there's these people who will drive through to experience the reservation poverty, and that's really fucked up. Go to the reservation, go to a restaurant, go to a store, contribute to the economy, talk to people, learn about their stuff. Don't just go to observe how terrible some of the conditions are. And not every reservation is that way either, right? They don't all live in squalor. It's partly tribal dependent. It's partly the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is the United States government, is a really fucked way to distribute the tribal awards. So yeah, go try to contribute and help their economy and help their culture, and don't just go there to take something. Go there to try to bring something back. But yeah, no, it's weird, and not in a bad way. It was just a really weird experience. And again, like I had been to third world countries that are very underdeveloped economies and have lots of poverty and very low technological progress for most of their people. And then I drove an hour or 2 hours it's 4 hours from a major airport and saw conditions that I never thought were imaginable in my own country / their country. I don't know how to refer to it. Again, they're American citizens if they can get passports if they want them, but they're sovereign nations. And I think we have a greater responsibility to help them in whatever way we can, just like any other person in American society. Yeah,
I think that's probably the highlight there is not just take, but give, whether you're talking about
I know I'm just going to start ranting, but like the public media funding, right? So the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is a private public partnership that the government was using to distribute money to media stations, NPR, PBS.
NPR is probably the biggest one.
Big ones.
PBS, NPR and PBS.
But a lot of people don't realize that there's radio stations on a lot of Native American reservations, and that's their sole source of information. So on my trip across the country, we talked about this a couple episodes ago. Part of that brought me through some tribal land. And that was part of the AM journey, right? We talked about that a little bit. But AM radio and they had FM radio too, but FM doesn't go as far. But there are still many places on reservations where their station is the way to get community events. Like people have Facebook events, so you tell everybody about your thing. In these locations, they call up the radio station and hey, I'm going to have a party for my daughter's 15th birthday. If you're in this area, come visit, because they don't have internet. The internet doesn't work there. They literally, maybe satellite internet, but they maybe can't afford it, or maybe it doesn't work there either because it's mountains. And so that's still the way that's the mass media. And there's other ways, of course, that they communicate and share information, but it's a vital resource for a lot of people in this country still. And it's such a small amount of money we as a society spend on it. And it just became politicized. And it just still pisses me off that story is not being told anywhere as far as, okay, that's not true. That story is not being told in most places. It's being told in those localities. There's a couple, like we have an independent station here in Portland that was talking about this to their credit, and how small independent radio stations are going to just basically go away because the funding for 2 or 3 people to run the station is like 99% government funded.
Yeah.
And then the plutocrats will say, well, they should just fund it themselves. But if you're living in poverty for whatever reasons and you can't afford to run your $200,000 a year radio station, it goes away.
Yeah.
Right. And the solution isn't cell phone, because there is no cell phone network for whatever reason. And if we were replacing that technology with the internet, maybe you would see me be a little bit more sympathetic. But I don't know what else to say. I try not to get too political on the show, but to save a few $1 million, and that sounds like a lot of money to a lot of people, but there's people
in the grand scheme of things,
and these tech companies that make millions of dollars to be there. And $200,000 probably sounds like a lot of money to a lot of people. In the grand scheme of the United States budget, which I think is like $4 trillion at this point, that doesn't even register.
Yeah.
So I want to talk more about this kind of stuff because it's really important to.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to labor on the politics of it. There's real impacts for these decisions. And if you believe whatever you want, if it's good or bad spending, I don't give a shit. I do give a shit about the impacts that it is having and the potential impacts. And I think the Democrats in particular catastrophize way too much. And they always point to all of these, what are mostly hypotheticals of problems that may or may not happen. And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. But I think we really need to ground our society in like actuals, right? Mm-hmm. Who's actually listening to this content that's not going to be produced anymore because they can't afford to. How many stations have gone out of business? Yeah. So anyway, that's my rant, which I guess will be in the middle of the program now. And because we've been talking, I think this one, I did. So and I know per normal, right? We're already like launched into the episode, but maybe I'll actually edit this so that it flows a little bit better. It's interesting. There's one thing I was going to put on the list and I didn't. Maybe I don't know if I'll mention that or not. Should I mention it?
I was going to say, our list keeps growing and growing.
I think I'm going to go, I'm going to do another tangent.
Okay.
So today,
if it's top of mind,
yeah. Today is National Code Talker Day, so it's like a celebration of the Navajo Code Talkers who in World War II helped America win in the Pacific.
Wow, I did not know that.
That's cool. Yeah, no. Oh, okay. Yeah, let me just double check that I did.
Yeah, I'm fact checking you.
So it's National Navajo Code Talkers Day, every August 14th. So we're recording on Thursday. And the Navajo Code Talkers there's a lot to really unpack. That could probably be its own episode. Maybe I should do an episode on that. So anyway, so the Navajo people are a Native American tribe in America, in North America. One of the larger tribes, and they might be the largest. But they have a long history, which I don't want to gloss over, but it's really complex. And I want to get to the Navajo Code Talker part. But I highly recommend people check it out. But anyway, so their language is very unique and complex, and during the World War II time frame, not a lot of people even knew about it. And the whole battle in Europe with the Nazis, there was a lot of codes, and the British were breaking the Nazi codes, the Nazis were breaking the American and the British codes, and it was really understood that like cryptography was really important, but because of the advent of computing like machines, codes were being broken at a much higher rate than in the past. And so one of the things that they tried in the Pacific was using the Navajo language to it was like a double-seeded code. I don't know enough about cryptography to understand that, but so like the language itself was unknown to most people. And the way that they referred to things in the language was a code into itself. And so they would have a word for like hummingbird. And so there's a Navajo word for that, and there's an understanding of hummingbird. But then a hummingbird also then referred to a type of Japanese bomber or a fighter, for example. Right, and so you could be listening to this, and even if you knew the language,
it sounded normal.
You have no idea what they're just talking about random shit, seemingly. And so they prescribed a code to that. And then there's all sorts of stories and cultural heritage that they were able to refer to that they didn't even have to talk about. So their culture is an oral tradition. Everybody's growing up with these stories so they could refer to something and no one outside of the community of people would know it, even what they were talking about. So they were able to be able to communicate large amounts of information very succinctly because they had built this code. And so I think there's about 400 of them who served in the Pacific Theater. And they were instrumental in pushing America forward. And I think it was one of the only codes in World War II that wasn't broken. And it was like top secret until I think it was like the 70s. We didn't even acknowledge it. But in kind of American tradition, the history of America and Native people is really fucked for a lot of different reasons. But so we went in, we got them, we trained them up, they did this amazing thing, and then we're like, you can't talk about it and we're not going to acknowledge it because national security, go back to your reservation, see ya. So it was unfortunately one of these we came in, used this culture, they made tremendous impact, and then we forbid them from talking about it, didn't really acknowledge it until much later on. Then it became, I think there was a movie about it. So then we've made up for it in a little bit of a way, but there's only 2 code talkers left in the world.
Wow.
Yep. And I don't know. I was reading this morning about there's only 2 left. And the reason I think this is meaningful to me is, one, I think we need to do a much better job of talking about history. 2, a lot of this kind of stuff gets, I don't know that it's necessarily whitewashed. Like, history is hard because there's so much detail and you have to have some kind of filter on it. And I think it's really easy to filter out a lot of uncommon culture. So a lot of people in America probably still don't know what the Navajo people are. They just think the Native Americans are all this giant group of people who are indigenous, and it's very, very not true, right? There's very, very unique cultures within the Native American population, even though they have some shared cultural heritage and traditions as well. But it's really easy to ignore that kind of stuff because it becomes a footnote, because there isn't that common knowledge. Whereas like everybody knows probably General Patton, or at least hopefully should, right? Because he's credited with a lot of the tactics that won the war in Europe. And so it's a much more cultural significant story because it's much more common knowledge. It doesn't, and when I say cultural significant, I'm not saying it's more important. It's just much more well known. And why is that? His work wasn't top secret, number 1, right? But also number 2, he was a bit of a showman and he had a PR. And so anyway, so if you don't know anything about it, Google Navajo Code Talkers, Navajo Code Talkers. Yeah. CNN had a big write-up on it. You'll find there's all sorts of documentaries, and it's a really cool thing. The reason this is significant to me is when I was in college, I was the first of, I think, a 4 or 6 year program that went to the Navajo Nation to interview elders. So they have
cool.
Yeah, they have, like I said, they have an oral tradition where they only talk about stories. They don't write anything down. They don't record it. A lot of their stories, in fact, can't be recorded because of the cultural tradition. They can only be told in at certain times or in certain circumstances. It's a very fascinating way of thinking.
Can you remember any story that you've been told that you're allowed to share, or anything that made like a significant impact on you going through that experience?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So yes, I can remember them, and no, I don't think that it's appropriate for me to share them.
Fair.
There are lots of books where the shared or it's so complicated. We should do a talk. I should.
So I'm curious, why is there a hesitation on freely sharing this? What is so significant?
It's their culture.
Okay, and this bleeds into some stuff that we talked about before. Yeah. We had this idea of culture and whether something is defensible sheerly because you can label it culture.
Yeah, and that was a huge debate on our project. So even the notion of us coming in, we did video and audio recording. That was a huge deal. Like, a lot of the elders at the time didn't even want to participate because they're like, we're an oral society. Our tradition is oral. It's been this way for literally thousands of years. Mm-hmm. And so the reason that a lot of people in the community decided to participate was that the elders were basically dying faster than the younger generation could uptake the stories. There's a lot of reasons for that. Like, people were trying to leave to get economic opportunity. Yeah, the same kind of some
of the problems we're seeing.
Right? And I guess the decision was made to try to preserve some of this history, and then I think also, like, this technology, of course, didn't exist 2,000 years ago, and if it did, would they have done that? I don't know. But there was a lot of controversy because, like, part of the oral tradition is that the story does change over time. The core details are there, but Grandpa's telling the story for the 30th time in a row or whatever. The details are going to be a little different. Grandpa's going to remember a little bit more of this part or that part. And
the bear was 50 feet long.
Yeah, and you get like the core. It's like anyone who's ever played the game, Telephone, where you start with one thing and it'll change. The interesting thing with a lot of oral traditions and a lot of cultures, though, is the core content doesn't change. Mm-hmm. But it does evolve. So it's almost more enduring and lasting than a lot of written tradition. Because if we were to go pull Abraham Lincoln's journal from 1830, we don't know any of the stuff he's talking about because we just don't have any context, and it's not probably really relevant. But these stories are the foundation of their culture. And so there's a lot of rules around who can tell them, in what setting and context, when, so times of year, or I'll try to speak, I guess, generally to try to illustrate the point, but they're like seasonality of stories. There's like event based. So if you're in a wedding traditional kind of thing, or somebody's born in your family, you're at a powwow and you're at a celebration. And then sometimes if it's a summer powwow or a spring powwow, you might have different stories or different variations. There's different phases of time in their society that they'll have stories that are relevant or not. And that's just part of the tradition. It's
so
really
is it like, I'm wondering, is it like you tell part of a story at one event and then chapter 2 you can only hear or something else?
No, 100%. Yeah, we were there at a time, and so we got some of that. But there are central themes, and the themes will change, or there's characters within the tradition that will reemerge in different ways. It's not really dissimilar to the Greek mythology and and the Roman mythologies. Like they would tell the stories of the rebirth of, I don't know enough about this anymore, but there'd be stories in the spring you would tell as part of the tradition of rebirth of plants and stuff, and there were stories to talk about overcoming. And so it's that idea. But I was a part of this project, and we recorded them, and they're all in the Smithsonian Institution's Museum of the American Indian, and it's an exhibit. It's on archive as well. And so they kept that going after I was in the kind of the first wave, and part of it was to capture, but part of it was also to then try to help teach people within the nation on how to do documentary journalism. And so the idea was that we weren't just there to capture the story and move on, which is unfortunately how the Navajo people specifically, but also a lot of Native cultures have been treated. There's a lot of interesting genetic information. There's been a lot. This is also it was common knowledge to some people. I guess most people have no idea what I'm talking about. But people will go in and study their genetics because they're very old people. They've been a tribal people, so there's really interesting. So people will come in, study that, and then they leave. And then the people get the benefit. So there's a very long, unfortunate tradition of people from outside the tribe being seen as coming in and taking and not really giving or benefiting.
Not giving back. Yeah.
And I think that's pretty true in a lot of instances. It's not true in every instance, but we were really cognizant going in. And so our part of that was to then help teach the students at Dene College, in this specific instance, how to do this stuff. And because we were journalism students and we had the knowledge, and some of them they had the journalism kind of storytelling program, but they didn't really have the technology understanding and that kind of stuff of how to do recording, how to set up an interview, how to do a shot. There's a lot of technical work that I think a lot of people take for granted now, that photography and videography has become so easy. And even now it's really still hard to get a good visual audio product. And to make it compelling and interesting to look at. And so like things like A-roll and B-roll. So A-roll is typically your main subject. B-roll it would be a shot of a tree or something like that. That is maybe relevant to the story, maybe not. It breaks up. So
transitional content.
Yeah, you're not just sitting there staring at somebody talk for 20 minutes. So it was a really interesting thing. And so I guess today I was just reading the kind of news, and I was like, oh yeah, it's so I wanted to mention that. I was thinking about doing a post about it too, or maybe.
Right. So I have a question. Yeah. If you're recording this, but like, how are you tying? I'm not connecting the dots. So when you're recording this, effectively documenting this process, but you can't reveal any of the stories that they're telling each other. How do you go about doing that?
Yeah. The primary story of the documentary was the elder.
Okay.
And so they were like notable people who have done stuff every
social recognition.
But it's like the culture is very elder driven, right? So grandpa or grandma, it's a maternalistic culture. So you take your mother's name, if I remember correctly, but it's the elders of the society who are in charge of shit, and they do the stuff. And we took, again, the Code Talkers were notable because it was a huge part of their culture that no one, even a lot of people on the reservation don't really know because they couldn't talk about it. A lot of the general culture of the tribe is like non-boastful, right? So if you were this really important Navajo Code Talker, you just wouldn't go tell everybody about it. It's just not what you did.
Right.
Like a lot of the people when we interviewed, like their kids would be there because grandpa is, I think at the time, probably in the 80s or 90s. And so they were like listening to these stories. They'd be like, what the fuck? I never knew this about my own dad, because they wouldn't talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was pretty common with a lot of the different people we talked to, is like the kids would have no idea. And grandkids, of course, had absolutely no idea. And that was,
you could argue it's kind of the same way now. People don't talk to their parents about these, right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
And so that was it. And then they would share, depending on what their position was within so there's all sorts of hierarchies of medicine. People are kind of the healers in the society, but in the Navajo tradition, they're also, I'd call them like the librarians of culture.
Nice. Yeah.
And like that term for them, it is also, I think, like really hard to define.
Yeah.
Because it's not like a doctor in our society where you go through all this training and you are the tome of medical knowledge. And it's not necessarily formal. Like there is formality to it. There are like medicine men or medicine people who are like recognized, but then there's like that role within your immediate family or your clan is also this kind of thing. And so it's actually an incredibly complex way of structuring things. So some of them would tell stories that were either seasonally appropriate, that they wanted to have archived, or were relevant to something they would talk about. They would tell us about yourself, telling us about, if you asked me to tell you about me, and as a Navajo elder, I'm probably talking about my clan or my family or the work I did. And I'm not going to be like, Andrew Newman did this sort of thing. Yeah. And so it's a very interesting. And so one of the things I wanted to bring up on that too was the stories that we were capturing were very nonlinear. And so going back to the seasonality or setting or whatever, is you would often get, like, you'd ask a question and we would go on for 45 minutes of listening to a story. Yeah. And sometimes that story would be told like 5 different times in different ways in 30 or 45 minutes. Because I remember we went in, I prepared, the first day we set up, we had all these questions prepared, and I asked the first question and we took a break after 45 minutes. And it's all nonlinear for the most part too. And I think that was like, so again, like we were there to help. I wouldn't say teach as much as kind of mentor was probably a better way to put it. Cause like they had the program that they had there had a lot of skill, and they were looking to refine it and also just learn from different techniques. We learned a fuck ton from them. Yeah. And the thing that I took away, that was the first time I think that I really encountered non-linear tradition, because I grew up very Western culture. Everything has a beginning and an end and a start, and there's steps that you take, and if you do the steps wrong, you fucked up. And it's very similar to creativity that I talked through. I didn't learn this until later in my journey as well, but yes, you start a painting and you end the painting by calling it done, but it's a very non-linear process to work through that. And some people will argue that a painting is never done. And there are artists who will paint something, come back to it 20 years later. And so that was the first time that I really encountered like nonlinear storytelling, nonlinear traditions. And it's really hard to try to capture that on a video or an audio format, because it is it's a linear capture. But it was really validating, because I don't tend to think very linearly. And I think a lot of people listen to the podcast like, this guy's all over the place. And I'm like, I'm not. I'm giving you different variations of a story or an example that I think fit within the arc of what I'm trying to explain or talk about. But I find that it's really hard for a lot of people, especially like Western culture, to pick up on that. And the Navajo people are not unique in this. A lot of Asian cultures have the same type of storytelling. A lot of African cultures have this same... But like European, North American, I don't know enough about Hispanic, that might be very nonlinear as well, are very nonlinear in history and story. And the details are not the details that you would expect as a Western societal person. It's a lot more about like the theme, or trying to capture the context, and not necessarily the nuance or the details of specificity. But that was so I found it tremendously validating. I was just like, I was just jamming with my elder. Like I'm like, this dude's, I get you, bro. And I would ask something, and he, in a linear tradition, I'd ask him something and he would totally ignore the question sometimes and just tell us like what he thought we were trying to get.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because he was arrogant or because he knew better. I think it was like he really
just the way he processed it.
Really smart dude.
Yeah,
and I think part of it was that's his way, but then part of it was also like maybe it was the wrong question or it was the wrong way to ask the question. And so it was really, it was a really fascinating experience. And I was lucky that my elder for my subject or whatever for the documentary was also our tour guide.
Yeah.
And so he would bring us on excursions, and because it was cultural share. It was also partly to learn about their culture. So one of the activities, I don't know what to call it, like cultural learnings, was a hike. We went on like a 20-mile hike in the middle of the desert. That was something. And we were just, I don't know if I want to tell too many details. We went to a site that is very culturally significant to a lot of people in their community, and a place that very few humans have probably been, period, let alone people outside of the tribe. So it was a really profound experience that we were entrusted with that. And so we're just on this hike. We don't know where we're going, right? It's just we're kind of following him. Yeah. And I was just talking to him because like he was my subject. So I was trying to get to know him, and also just generally thought he was a really cool dude. And we were just chatting about just random shit. And a lot of chatting is like asking something and then having 20 minutes of explanation about so it's like we're having like a pretty linear conversation. I'm just talking now, but I'll tell you. But it was a lot of just listening. And it was a lot of what we call like negative space of not talking, and just he would point something out and why is that significant kind of stuff. And then I found out that this was like part of his ancestral land. So like the way that the reservation works is like this is sovereign territory for these people in the United States of America. There's a lot of weird federal jurisdiction rules, but it exists in like New Mexico, Arizona, and I think a tiny bit of Utah.
Makes that weird.
Yeah, they call it the checkerboard region because there's a lot of different tribal land in there as well. And the state has zero jurisdiction. It's sovereign territory.
Wow.
The federal government technically has treaty specific things they can and cannot do, but it's basically a different country.
Yeah.
And for all intents and purposes, even though it's like this whole thing is their country or their land, right? But so it's one of the weirdest kind of setups in the world. I'm not aware of any sort of thing like this, which again, I think is so cool about America, that like we've done a lot of atrocities to the native people, but we've also carved out large sections of America that are effectively different countries.
Yeah.
But the way that, so then they have this kind of land, and then within that tribal land, different families and different clans have, I guess, land rights. It's not land rights at all, but it's the closest thing I would describe would be that, and that was like their patch where they would do sheep farming. And so I found out that he's been walking this path for 70 years because his family used to raise sheep, and then the sheep herding didn't work out, or was I think the climate basically changed and they couldn't subsist on that anymore. So they changed to do other stuff. But so I had no idea. I thought we were just going for some walk in some park basically. And we're going on the hike, and we went to a couple of these sites that most people in the world have never seen. You'd never know is there unless you grew up there. You'd have no idea. And a lot of people who grew up there probably had no idea it was there. So that was really, really cool. But I'm on a tangent now, but I guess that was, I was trying to make
that was the reason.
Trying to make a point. Yeah. Oh yeah. Cause a lot of it was a nonlinear discussion. I should put a link to we did a full like 3.5 or 4.5 hour kind of interview documentary style thing. And then we broke that down into, I think it was like an 8 or 10 minute mini doc, I guess you could call it. So it was kind of like, it was. Yeah. And then unfortunately for the project, we didn't have a ton of time. We wanted to do more of a feature length. We just didn't have time. And then we thought about breaking it into series. We didn't have time. This is the shit with this kind of stuff is like, it's
never done.
No, it's never done.
The way you want it.
It also reinforces the take from the culture thing. And I don't think we did that at all, but I was thinking about this. I was trying to find, because I knew some of this was on the internet and some of it's, I have an actual hard copy of a lot of this stuff too. And it exists in archives, but I was like, wow, you can't even find it. And that, I think that was a tremendously lost opportunity on this project, because it was, the project itself was pretty innovative. And then the story of the project, I think, could have been marketed in a lot of ways to support the idea of the preservation and the exchange. Like we did a couple film screenings and that kind of stuff. So my doc was actually in a film festival. So I'm a published documentarian.
Is there an achievement or some sort of title?
I guess, yeah. And and it's on archive for all of history and all of time in the National Archives.
That's cool.
So it's cool too.
Yeah.
Very few people can claim that. And it wasn't even really, and it's funny because if you go look, you probably won't find it, because like the way that it's lit, if you look for me, you're not going to find it. I think that's cool. I definitely am an author. I definitely contributed. I did a lot of the interviewing, not because I like even really wanted to, but I was nominated by my group to. They're like, we don't want to talk for 12 hours. Why don't you do it? But that's interesting too. And so part of the culture, so we had white American people. Well, I guess we weren't all white, but we had like American people, and then we had Navajo people, and we built groups where we had some U.S. North American. I don't know how to refer to us, because they're American citizens too. It's really, really weird. So we had non-Navajo people, and Navajo people in the group. But part of their tradition is you don't ask questions to your elders as like a kid, right? Because it'd be disrespectful. It'd be like if you met the president and just being like, "Oh, wow, your foreign policy is bullshit. Let me tell you what I think." You just don't do that. And so there was a little bit of a cultural obstacle to get them, because part of it, so they're like, oh, you should definitely interview. And so I was like, whatever. I think everybody figures out to do whatever I want. I was like, whatever. So I'll do it. And I was doing it. And then I was seeing that, and we were comparing notes afterwards as group. And then also we all knew each other going in. The non-Navajo people I was like, they never asked questions. Like, we're supposed to be here. And then one of the professors was like, in our tradition, we don't do that. I was like, how are you going to carry on a documentary project if no one can talk to the elder? We need to figure out, I don't want to come in and just smash your culture, but I'm like, the whole point of this is to try to capture the stories. And if you don't ask the questions or you don't set up that. So one of the people on our team or whatever, she's a little more outgoing. With some encouragement, she took the interview seat. Because we sat down in a traditional interview style where, kind of sitting across from the person. We had a camera and the mics and all that shit. And yeah, the first questions I remember is really, really rough, because she was like basically apologizing for asking. And our elder was super cool. He was just like, yeah, like whatever, ask away. And I think they were also in the same clan. And so you have your family unit, you have your clan unit. And so then there's all these other rules, right? That you address people and who can talk and ask questions and that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a really interesting. So she crushed it. That was the best part. Nice. Because she was like really nervous. And I was like, just write some shit down, ask something. And I already figured the pattern was like, you ask a question and then you go on this like massive tangent. And I was like, just listen to what he's saying. And if you don't understand something or want to know more, that's a follow-up. That's totally cool. Yeah. Like you do all the prep work. And I think good interviewers would do all that prep work. And then a lot of times you chuck it, right? It's like having a project plan for software. So you have this massive idea, you have this vision, you go to start doing it. And then you're like, actually, we've discovered or we've invented all this other shit that we should now go do instead.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine.
Yeah.
And so, it was really, really cool to see. Yeah, I should really it'd be interesting to get some folks who are on that to talk through on the podcast a little bit more.
However they can. Yeah. It seems like they have to navigate that a bit weird.
So almost everything we captured is on archive. There was some stuff that people would tell stories and we had to carve it out because it was like not appropriate, but they have it, but it's not like generally available for non-Navajo people. So if I remember, I could be wrong. It's been a long time. But if I remember correctly, the National Archive stuff was all non-Navajo consuming approved or whatever.
Yeah.
And then all of the raw content, everything that we recorded is archived on the Navajo Nation. So anyone who's a tribal member, like a scholar there, can get the literal raw, like literally the second we hit record we stopped. which is a weird way to do a documentary because usually there's editing, or even if you're doing light editing, but yeah, all the raw footage is there. And I thought that was really cool too. And so, we didn't delete anything, and all the like ups and out of focus, like camera shots and like all that shit is,
especially when, tech wasn't that great. Right?
Yeah, but that's a cool meta in itself too, right? Because it's a lot of times
it's raw.
Yeah, the source, you could talk about in software, like the source material for the documentary doesn't get put in
even
the
in
archives.
AV projects.
Yeah,
even AV projects.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff that's been done by other people too, like the raw material, as far as I understand, is not in the archives.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I could be wrong, but my understanding was that was unique about our project, and that was one of the reasons we were able to do it. But I also, like, looking back at it, I wouldn't do it any other way. It wouldn't make any sense. It's like the meta of this is in 100 years or 200 years from now, maybe people will go back and be like, why didn't we have more of this recorded? Right? Mm-hmm. Duh, it's been around. Why didn't we do it? And maybe we'll be an archive note of somebody's new work of iterative in the future, talking about this project it wasn't the first by any means, but because all of that material was there, maybe someone will find it valuable in the future. That's a really cool thing, I think. But yeah, in the area of information, like we've never been, I feel like, so much more on like creating a quote unquote finished product or a polished product. Mm-hmm. And we've never had more opportunity to show how the sausage is made, so to speak, and make that accessible for derivative work that you could never possibly fathom what could come from. And that's how the entire world of technology has been built. I know you and I are in this. A lot of people have no idea that a lot of stuff like AI, right? Our current transformer architecture was put out by Google. I think it was 2012.
Long ago, yeah.
Right? They're like, there's a cool idea. Maybe we should do it. And you come back 10 years later. Now it's like nobody, or 15 years later, like you can't have a conversation without somebody mentioning it. Yeah. But if that would have just been some personal project or some academic initiative locked away in the vaults of some journal somewhere, like probably never would have been discovered.
Yeah. Okay. So
isn't that a different world?
Yeah. I think there's a philosophical element to this too. It's like when you're talking about oral cultures, there's got to be some understanding that if a culture has decided to adopt an oral tradition, that eventually they realize that it's going to die out. Like you can't. Yep. Oh, actually, I don't know if I can say that for sure. And that's what this project was a way to document that process, right?
And that was part of the pushback from some folks, was that they're like, if it dies, it dies. Like that. How many stories have we lost before because we don't know?
No way to capture it. Exactly. It's very much the same way with product ownership or software. It's like you have to know when to just let go of something. Yep. Okay, you built this out. Too bad. It's not what you need right now. So don't keep building it. So it's more about like the process and understanding it than to actually try and preserve it or to keep it going, just to keep it going. And that's the contention I have with the idea of cultures is are you doing it just to preserve it just because, or is there an actual reason for doing it, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what I think is so interesting about the oral tradition in general, throwing back to how you were talking about different perspectives and nonlinearity. You hear the stories and they may have different forms, but in the generations of these stories being told, there's some meme, right? Like in the traditional sense of the meme, piece of information that gets passed on through generations. Yeah. And that, or how you present it, evolves, but the core idea is there. So maybe it's like a coming of age thing, or like how to survive in this area kind of thing. And all that's a through line, but there's still ways to present it. And it's like how you talk about all these different things, there's still a through line. It's just you're approaching it from different
lines. No, 100%. And I think it's a beautiful idea that your culture is only orally recorded and dependent on the memories and the traditions and whatnot of the people. Mm-hmm. But that's also a forcing function for growth and progression.
Evolution,
right? Because it's like your memory is selective, or everybody has a slightly different variation. And everyone knows this in the culture, that sometimes the stories between people are vastly different. So it's like then up to the listener to try to decide what the actual importance is or the truth is. But it also leaves a lot of ambiguity for you to then fill in your own version or grow in ways that you wouldn't be if someone's just telling you. But then at the same time, because you don't have an archival method, if you would, part of that will die out, right? People will either just stop telling the story or forget about it, or literally they're the ones who know when they die. But then that also pushes your culture forward. So the Western idea that it's like a primitive way of maintaining a record, I think is very ignorant. And I think it ignores the fact that the lack of record is also then how things move forward sometimes. And I would almost say our society is much more conservative because we wrote stuff down, and now we're trying, like the America and the constitutionalists, right? You have these people who like believe the literal way that the Constitution was written should be how we move our society forward in 2025. And like none of these people ever conceived of anything like space travel, let alone the internet and having instantaneous information, cell phones, the ability to communicate. The telegraph wasn't even invented yet.
Yeah.
And so this idea that we should then pretend that these people were so brilliant that could have foreseen all of this stuff is a little ignorant in itself, but it's really easy to point to the actual written word. And I would also say a lot of these people owned other humans.
Yeah.
And we decided that was fucked up. We shouldn't let that happen anymore. There are some people who still think that should happen and they're fucked. But it's like, how long did that go on for in this country specifically, slavery, that a lot of, like the Dutch actually invented this model, and the slave trade was largely credited to them, but they got off it much sooner than America did. Right. So they invented it. They didn't get a lot of credit for it. America always gets to be demonized, but no, it was largely the Dutch, Spanish, the Portuguese too, but the Dutch, the Dutch trading company, like made this thing a multi-trillion-dollar industry basically, and built a lot of the Netherlands.
The adoption. Yeah.
And there's an interesting cultural resurgence of them now talking about this, because it was this kind of hush hush. Oh yeah, we're not going to talk about the past kind of thing. But then America just kept it going. Why was that? Was that because we wrote it down and we said, what is it? It was 3/5, right? 3/5 for every, a slave is 3/5 of a person.
Full quote unquote.
Yeah. For population inventory purposes for the census and whatnot. And we could keep going back to that and saying, wow, we can't possibly change it because that's what we wrote down here. But I don't know, maybe not. Maybe we would still have it. I don't know. But I think it's a really fascinating way to think about how much easier it would be if your slavery contingent part of the population was an oral tradition and they literally just died out, or they became so separated from the rest of society because everyone else was like, nah, they're just not right. We're just going to ignore them. And then that idea quite literally dies out. And then you have a distant memory of, remember those people who had that weird idea that you could own people? And then that eventually just goes away.
Yeah.
And maybe it's like Battlestar Galactica then, and then it just repeats itself. Spoiler.
Yeah, time is cyclical.
Now we're so far off track. I don't know where we are.
There was to tie that back in.
Nathan GPT, let's go.
I was going to tie it in something, but I don't know how much time we have, because there was this idea of when you're talking about oral tradition and the meaning that's conveyed out of someone telling you something, sometimes you get it wrong when you're interpreting something, right? Sometimes you make a deduction that is not there. Yeah. And that can lead you to misinterpret the thing, very much like the telephone game or whatever, right? That evolves in a direction you never anticipated it going in. You're going to have to edit it around.
I don't know. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But yeah, no, I'll try to make it flow a little bit. But yeah, we got off to talking about some cool shit, and then I started ranting. So you may or may not be listening to this before we talked about the cool shit, or you may hear about it after the cool shit. And I think the fundamental message is that time is a human construction to try to make sense of events.
Yes. Nonlinearity.
All right. Tune in next time.
See ya.
You can find us at 3reate.com. It's like the word create, but with a 3 instead of the C. As always, we encourage you to listen, watch, do. We'll see you next time. You can support this podcast at patreon.com/3reate or at ko-fi.com/3reate. Thanks for listening.